I wish more people realized that the dream of FAANG is really just a nightmare in disguise. Do you like playing games? How about winning prizes and money? What if I told you you could play games and win prizes at the same time? That is what .tech Domains is doing for you. They set up this amazing puzzle challenge set where you can play through and win these awesome prizes. I personally have been playing some of these games and I'm not gonna lie, I spent way too much time playing them. I was supposed to be recording this video right here that you're watching, but I was so busy playing through these puzzles because they were so much fun, they were so challenging, and best of all is you can win some really cool prizes. I actually love the prizes that they have. I'm really interested in quite a few of them. I'm just really happy that a company like .tech Domains would take time and money to set something like this up completely for free for you. All they want you to do is have some fun because, as we all know, 2020 has kind of sucked, so they just want to give you a chance to have some fun and win some prizes, which is really cool in my opinion, and I love a company that does that kind of stuff. I have a link to the page down in the description below. This just opened up and only runs until December 2nd, so make sure that you check it out now so that you don't miss out on the opportunity to win these prizes. And have as much fun as I have because this has truly been incredibly fun. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name is Kyle, and my job is to simplify the web for you so you can start building your dream project sooner. So if that sounds interesting, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. Now to get started, in this video I want to talk all about FAANG, which means Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, the big tech companies of the world. Because so many people look at these companies and think this is my dream job. I want to work at FAANG. It is going to be awesome. I'm going to be at Google. They do all the coolest things. They have the coolest campus. I can't wait to work for FAANG. I see it everywhere. Whether it's junior developers, senior developers, intermediate developers, all of them want to work for FAANG. But so many people don't realize that FAANG is not nearly as great as people make it out to be, and there are a lot of problems with FAANG companies. And in this video, I want to talk about some of those problems and why I personally would never work for a FAANG company. Now, the first problem, which is one that pretty much everyone can relate to, is the terrible interviews that you have to go through to land a job at a FAANG company. You're going to have to go through multiple rounds of technical and non-technical interviews on campus, off campus, on the phone. There's a huge screening process for candidates to become either an intern or a full-time employee at a FAANG company. And this is because they get tons and tons of applicants and they need to screen through them all to find the best ones. So it's incredibly competitive. And these interviews, they use almost all of the worst techniques when it comes to hiring candidates. They use things from whiteboarding problems to, terrible algorithms and data structure questions about things that you never actually need to know in real life, but you need to know in order to pass the interview. This then leads to entire companies whose sole goal is to teach you algorithms and data structures so that you can go and pass an interview at a FAANG company, only to never use any of that information ever again, because it's just there to pass a stupid interview to get hired for a company. I hate this because algorithms, sure, they're important, but is it really that important to understand these algorithms? And it also makes it so that people that don't have a traditional computer science background have a harder time getting in because you're not going to learn algorithms in, a boot camp, for example, or on YouTube because they're not very useful to you as a programmer or a web developer. But if you want to get hired at one of these FAANG companies, you need to know those. So the people that learn those in computer science degrees, for example, have a leg up because they're going to be better at those type of questions and interviews. So now let's just say that you pass the interview by some miracle, you get all the algorithm questions right, you pass all the on-campus, off-campus interviews, and now you got hired at a FAANG company as whatever software engineer 1, for example. This is probably a great feeling you're going to celebrate, and you passed a hard interview. But then as you start to work and you're like, oh man, this is so cool, I'm working at Google or Netflix, you're going to quickly realize that when you start out as a software engineer 1, for example, you're going to be doing tons and tons of mundane work because they have thousands of employees in their campus. So all of the higher ranking employees are the ones doing the cool, planning and architecting of cool big projects, while you're stuck doing some debugging tasks, maintenance, IT work. You're doing all the stuff nobody else wants to do because you're at the bottom of the totem pole. You're a software engineer 1, and all the senior engineers are doing all of the cool stuff. So it may be cool working at Netflix or Google and being a part of that machine, but you're a very, very tiny cog instead of a giant machine. And sometimes those tiny cogs don't really get taken care of, and nobody really cares if they're happy or enjoying the work that they're doing. They just saying, oh, you're a cog in the machine, and that's all you are. That's really how it feels. It's very corporate to be inside of one of these companies because you're just in a massive machine, and it needs that corporate environment in order to thrive. So in order to actually move up the chain and go from software engineer 1 to 2 to 3 to mid-level to senior and so on to get to the actual cool stuff that you really want to do with FAANG, you need to go through a ton and a ton of corporate crap. I mean, you have to make sure that the boss knows that you're good. You have to make sure you network with a bunch of different people, and you have to deal with all these different corporate roadblocks. Just get promoted into a better position. So you're going to spend years and years of your life working to try to move up to do something that you really want to do, just because you want to work at FAANG. And on top of that, all of this corporate nonsense is going to slow you down a ton when it comes to development. There are tons of checks and balances inside of these large FAANG companies that ensure that all of the code you write is properly reviewed and maintained. And while yes, this is a really good thing to make sure the code that goes out is good, the problem is that when these companies are so large and so much depends on the systems you work on, the amount of stuff you have to go through just to make changes is astronomical. I mean, you're probably going to spend more time not writing code than you will writing code because you're going to be in meetings, you're going to have to deal with code reviews, you're going to have to deal with testing of your code and Q&A and all of that stuff. Well, if you were just to work for maybe a local smaller company, there's not nearly as much, corporate BS to go through because it's a smaller company. There's not nearly as much on the line, and you get to do more rewarding work because you're constantly one of the higher up developers in the company since it's not a massive company. So you're constantly working on all of the cool stuff all the time. While in FAANG, like I said, you're just a cog in the machine. Now, there are some benefits to being the cog in the machine, though, because you get to work on large scale applications that are changing the world. Even if all you do is a very small portion of Google, let's just say that you changed the text on the homepage of Google from I'm feeling lucky to I'm feeling kind of lucky. That alone is impacting millions and millions of people's lives. So you're making a huge impact with the applications you work on, but it's really hard to see that impact because usually you're very far removed from the impact you're making. Maybe you're debugging some internal tools that people inside of the team use in order to build an application that allows them to build a different application, which in turn turns into a different application that finally the end user sees. You're like 9 steps removed from the actual thing that's happening and impacting people. So while you're at a large company that impacts millions or billions of lives every day, it's hard for you to see the work that you do as impacting those people directly because you're so far removed and you're working on such a small part of the system that it's hard to see the overall system. And I know a lot of people really crave that type of encouragement you get from impacting so many people directly. And they think working at a FAANG company will give that to them because they're at a huge company that impacts tons of people. But what they don't realize is that you're not really the one impacting those people. You technically are because you're working on the code, but it's really hard to see that when you're working on it. And it can be really discouraging if your main motivation for working at that company is impacting large amounts of people because it's really hard to see that impact and to see the difference you're making. While if you work for a smaller company, even if you only impact tens or hundreds or thousands of people, it's really easy to see that when you make a change, you're directly impacting those people because you are the main developer in that situation or one of the main developers, and you're constantly working on the main product of that company. Now, by far, the biggest thing that I think is a problem with these FANG type companies is work-life balance. A lot of people, when they see on TV or on the movies, they see these companies, they're like, wow, they have the best work-life balance. The offices are so cool. They have crazy awesome chairs. They have ping pong and video games and all this cool stuff in their offices. That's a great place to work. But the reality is that, if you're going to be doing all those cool things like sitting around in the lounge or eating at the cafeteria or playing ping pong, the managers are going to look at you and be like, oh, you're kind of lazy compared to John over here who works 80 hours a week and never messes around on ping pong. So I'm going to, promote John instead of you. So even though you have all those perks, using them, people may look at you and be like, oh, well, you're not as hardworking, so I'm going to promote this other guy that's working way harder than you. So that can be kind of discouraging because you have all these cool things that you can do, but you can't actually use them. Also, these things are really tricks by companies in order to get you to stay at work longer. Because if they have a cafeteria built in, you're going to eat there. Maybe you eat lunch there, maybe you eat dinner there, maybe you eat breakfast there. Now you're there all day. If they have a ping pong table set up, you may hang around after work and play some ping pong. And if something comes up in the company and you need to do some changes, well, you're already there, so why not just do them? And these are kind of traps that, while on the outside they look really good as employee benefits, they're really there from the employer perspective to try to get you to stay at work longer, to work more without actually realizing that you're working more. It's really not uncommon for people to spend 10 plus hours a day at these types of companies working just because of these different traps that are set up by the employer. Well, when you work for a smaller company, maybe a local company or a company that's just not a massive FANG company, they're not going to have these traps set up to try to keep you there. And generally, you're going to find you have a better work-life balance where you're working much less hours, which means that you have more time outside to work on the things you're passionate about, spend time with your family, friends, and so on, which to me is the most important thing. I'd much rather work 20 hours a week or 40 hours a week than to work 60 or 80 hours a week. Even if I got paid 10 times as much to work 60 hours a week, it wouldn't be worth it because what are you going to do with the money if you don't have the time to actually enjoy it? Speaking of money, another reason that people love FAANG so much is that you get high salaries. And this is pretty common across a lot of FAANG companies. You're going to be getting paid $100,000+ even as an entry-level developer. And this may sound great on the outside until you realize that you have to move to a place like Silicon Valley where the cost of living is so high that even if you make $100,000, it really doesn't give you any better life than making $40,000 in a different state where the cost of living is much lower. So while, yes, you can tell all your friends you make six figures, really you're just as poor as someone making much, much less money than you. So really that salary doesn't actually go as far as most people think it does because they fail to realize how high the cost of living can be when they move to some of these places required by these FAANG companies. I know when I got hired at my first development job, I worked at a very small company. There was only, I think, 4 or 5 other developers there when I started, including the 2 owners of the company. So it was a very small company. And my salary was significantly lower than my friends that went to, Silicon Valley, for example. They were getting paid over double, sometimes even triple what I was getting paid. But they're still living in an apartment that costs them 4 times as much as it does for me to pay for my house where I'm living. So even though I got paid significantly less on paper, I technically was making more than them because the cost of living where I'm at so much lower than the cost of living where they're at. Now, FAANG isn't all bad though. If these kinds of things don't bother you, then FAANG is great. If you really like working at a large company, you like being in that large corporate environment, go for it. But I know a lot of developers really don't enjoy that, and they sometimes don't realize that that's really what FAANG represents. And while you may try a long time to get into a FAANG company, you finally get in, you're super excited, it's really, really demoralizing to realize that this is maybe not what you always wanted. I wanted to make this video to really show you that FAANG companies aren't quite what they always appear to be, and sometimes the best place to get hired is in your local city or local state or town or wherever you live, because it's so much easier to get a job, you don't have to go through all the crazy algorithm interviews, and you may have a much better work-life balance, and even if you get paid less, you may actually be richer than the person working over getting paid more than you in Silicon Valley. And with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you can check out some of my other videos linked over here, and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.